We gather together today as the dear family and friends of Florence Sable. As we mourn her loss, we also celebrate the full, rich life she led. Death has taken our beloved Flossie. Friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence there is lamentation. In their tears there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For her love that united us in life, and which death cannot sever. For her companionship which we shared along life's path, and which still continues through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of her heart and her mind, which brought us joy and happiness, and now become a precious heritage of the Spirit. For all these and more, God, we give you our praise. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai natan, Adonai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mivarach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people, we're well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us. Yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave, and there is strength in faith. With Job we say, Adonai Natan, God, you have given. You gave us a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in her life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Proverbs 31. Eshet chayil mi yimsa v'rechok mipni mikra. A woman of valor who can find. She's more precious than fine pearls. Her husband trusts in her, and so he lacks nothing. She does him good, never harm, all the days of her life. She perceives that her labor is rewarding. Her candle burns on into the night. She reaches out to those in need and extends her hands to the poor. She is clothed in strength and dignity, and she faces the future cheerfully. She speaks with wisdom. The law of kindness is on her lips. Her family rise up and bless her. They sing her praises. Many daughters have done valiantly, but you excel them all. A poem entitled My Hereafter. Do not come when I am dead, to sit beside a low green mound, or bring the first daffodils, because I love them so. For I shall not be there. You cannot find me there. I will look up at you from the eyes of little children. I will bend to meet you in the swaying boughs of bud-thrilled trees, and caress you with the passionate sweep of storm-filled winds. I will give you strength in your upward tread of everlasting hills. I will cool your tired body in the flow of the river. I will warm your work-glorified hands through the glow of the winter fire. I will soothe you into forgetfulness to the drop, drop of the rain on the roof. I will speak to you out of the rhymes of the masters, and I will dance with you in the lilt of the violin, and make your heart leap with the bursting cadence of the organ. I will flood your soul with the flaming radiance of the sunrise, and bring you peace in the tender rose and gold of the after sunset. All these have made me happy. They are part of me, and I shall become a part of them. Psalm 15. Adonai, mi yagor b'ohalecha, mi yishkon b'har kodshecha. Adonai, who may abide in your house? Who may dwell in your holy mountain? A woman of integrity who acts justly and speaks truth in her heart, who has no slander on her tongue, who does no evil to her friend, and has no insult for her neighbor, who has contempt for the wicked but honors those who fear God, who gives her word and come what may does not retract, who does not exploit others for gain, nor take bribes against the innocent. One who lives in this way shall never be shaken. Adonai ro'i lo echsar, bin al desha yar bitzeni, al mei minachot yanachaleni. Please join me now in the familiar words of the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters, and restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The Baal Shem Tov, the Hasidic Rebbe, once observed that there are 3 ways to mourn. The first is with tears, the second is with silence, and the third is with song. When we mourn someone truly beloved, we experience all 3. Tears at first, then silence as our grief settles more deeply, and finally song as we're able to celebrate the memories we hold deep in our hearts. So today may be a time for tears as we say our final goodbyes to Florence. We will each remember Flossie in our own way. Flossie will be remembered as a beloved mother to Marjorie and George, Jerry and Terry. Alex and Bram and Emma will all remember Florence as a devoted grandmother. Throughout her life, Florence was a loving wife to Hank and a caring sister to Joe and Sam. And Flossie was a special friend to Irv Krieger. Florence was born on September 11th, 1920, in Buffalo, New York, to Bessie and Alex Moline. She was the youngest of 3, and her brothers were 8 and 10 years older than her. Her parents both worked in her father's store, and she describes herself as a latchkey kid and spent a lot of time alone. But she was very close to her girl first cousins, Reva, Trudy, Dorothy, Eva, Ida, and Gittel. Every Sunday, the group went to dinner together at their grandmother's. Florence also became friends with Betty in elementary school, and they remained close their entire lives. Florence met her beloved Hank one summer in high school at a Workman's Circle summer camp outside of Toronto. They continued to date while Florence was in college at Cornell. A few weeks after her graduation, they were married on June 28, 1942, in Niagara Falls, Canada, in between her home in Buffalo and Hank's home in Toronto. They lived in Toronto while Henry finished medical school and became a doctor in the Navy. Following the war, they moved to Illinois and then to St. Louis, where Hank earned a Ph.D. and Flossie got a master's in social work at Washington University. Florence worked as a medical social worker at Jewish Hospital until Marjorie was born in 1949. The next year they moved to Boston, where Jerry was born in 1951, and then the family settled here in Cleveland in 1953. Florence worked at the Jewish Family Service Association on Taylor Road. And except for a wonderful sabbatical year living in Geneva, Switzerland in 1959 and 1960, Florence remained in Cleveland until her move to Columbia, Missouri after her stroke to be closer to Marjorie. After that sabbatical, she worked as a social worker for a few years in Orange and then in Cuyahoga Heights Public Schools for many years until her retirement in 1986. Florence made friends with a group of women in the Cuyahoga Heights School that became her lifelong friends. They call themselves the Bananas. Florence was a member of Park Synagogue, and she was very active in many groups and organizations. Case Western Reserve University Medical Wives Club, several book groups, a play readers group, a gallery goers group, Naamat Pioneer Women, and the Alzheimer's Association. Florence cared for Hank lovingly during his illness. When it got to be a challenge, she joined a support group, And when he passed away in 1992, she began to volunteer with the Alzheimer's Association to help other families who were going through the same things she had faced. Florence had many friends. She was loved by all, and she was everyone's best friend. This week, Marjorie received many messages from her mother's friends. They said, "Florence was a special soul with an impish sense of humor. She was an amazing woman, strong, independent, courageous in her generation." Florence's dear friend Bernice Davis said, "Florence was my best friend. She was so unique. She wasn't like anyone else. Everything she said was always original. She never said anything mean about anyone. We went through the stages of life together." Florence spoke to her cousin Dorothy every Saturday night for 20 years until her stroke. Dorothy said Flossie could keep a secret. She never shared anything you told her in confidence. Marjorie remembers when she was working in St. Louis after college, her mother cooked a whole Thanksgiving dinner here in Cleveland, froze it, wrapped it up in newspaper, put it in a suitcase, and brought it to St. Louis. Florence did embroidery and other needlework. She made chair pillows for all of her and Hank's alma maters, Cornell, University of Toronto, Case Western Reserve, and Washington University. Florence was just very accomplished in everything she did. She swam 3 days a week at the JCC and attributed her being in such good shape to her swimming, and her good teeth were due to her daily flossing. Today, Jerry realizes that he and Marjorie took their mother for granted when they were young. Florence was just so understated. She was an ordinary woman with extraordinary qualities. As Jerry and Marjorie grew older, it became more obvious to them over time that their mother was so special, so extraordinary. She was natural and unpretentious, warm and friendly. Florence was completely comfortable with herself. She was such a giving person and accepted everyone as they were. Marjorie and Jerry really came to appreciate their mother's extraordinary qualities later in life. And so today is a time for tears. We are saddened by the loss of Florence, but we learned so much from her, especially how to care for one another. Let these tears serve to strengthen and uphold you as a family. There's a story in our tradition about a rabbi who once passed an old woman planting trees. "Old woman," he called, "why are you planting those trees? You'll never live to see them blossom." But the woman replied, "My ancestors planted trees not for themselves but for us, that we might enjoy their shade and their fruit. I too do the same for all those who will come after me." Florence planted an orchard for each one of us, an orchard filled with devotion and with love, and these will always be here for us. We must be grateful that we're able to share in her life. Tomorrow there'll be fewer tears, more silence. As the Baal Shem Tov noted, it will be a time for pondering, a time for contemplation. Florence will become a greater part of our characters and our beings as we integrate the memories and the values she taught us into our own selves. But finally, there'll come a time for song. A time will come we can celebrate Florence when we recall all that we learned from her and how she touched each of our lives. May she rest in peace. Zecher Siracha Livracha. May the memory of Florence Sable be a blessing. Amen. I'd now like to invite Marjorie to share some personal words about her mother, and she'll be followed by her son, Bram. You can both come to the lectern.
I want to thank all of you for coming. You were all so special to my mom. She loved each and every one of you, and it's just warms my heart to see all of you here today, so thank you for coming. Especially my cousins Howie and Marge and her first cousin Gattell, who came from Buffalo today in the rain. So it's really special to me to see you. Barb Davis and Susan Glazer were just like daughters to her, growing up next door to Barb and with Susan from kindergarten. So I know that she loved you both too. She loved all of you. Rabbi Marcus said a lot of the things that I was going to say, but I just wanted to say another thing about her, taking her for granted. Jerry and I were talking the other day about it, and I was remembering that it wasn't until I was in college that I realized that my parents weren't just put on this earth for the sole purpose of taking care of me. We probably all had that kind of feeling growing up. And we didn't appreciate until we were so much older what an extraordinary person our mother was. At her 90th birthday party, I can't count the number of people who came up to me to tell me that Mom was their best friend. I got an email today from my cousin Miriam that I wanted to read. She said, just talk. They used to talk several times a year on their birthdays, and on New Year's Day they would talk to each other. Miriam lives in California. She said, just talking to her lifted my spirits tremendously. She was such a good listener, and I think that's one of the qualities that my mother had that was so special. She was such a good listener. And she always looked on the bright side. And she loved life. I so enjoyed hearing about her book groups, her bananas, her swimming, her boyfriends, her children, her grandchildren, and everything else that she openly shared. May we all lead such long and fulfilling lives. And I had forgotten until just a few nights ago that my mom had colon cancer when she was 55. I was living in St. Louis then. I was 25. So early screening and detection saved her, and I got to keep her around for another 41 years. Another good health practice that you heard about was flossing. She attributed that she still had all her teeth at age 96 to flossing. And even when she broke her hip a couple years ago and she was in the hospital at Ahuja and I flew in, one of the first things she wanted me to bring her was her dental floss. So I know how lucky I am to have had such an amazing mother for 67 years, and I will miss her, but I will carry her with me forever. I wanted to read, my son Alex couldn't come in. He flew into Columbia when my mom was dying and was there after she died and spent a day with us then, but he couldn't come back. So he sent this for me to read to you. Dear family and friends, I wish I could be here today to celebrate the life of my Nana, but duty calls and I am working at the hospital, or hospitalized, as Nana used to once put it. I'm incredibly grateful, however, to have been able to make it to Nana's bedside when she died and share that moment with my family. Over 31 years, I have absorbed the love, resilience, devotion, and gusto that radiated from Nana and is now part of my being, my untaxable inheritance from this amazing woman. Some of you have known her for more than 3 times as long as I have, and I can't imagine the impact that she has had on you. The influence of Nana's incredible life force didn't wane one bit even after her stroke and her move to the Bluffs in Columbia. She brought my family closer together, with my mom, dad, and brother visiting her twice daily to feed her meals, and me visiting home more than I would have had Nana not moved there. My dad, at age 75, even started riding his bike again to and from the Bluffs nearly every day. Against all odds, Nana is no longer here, but I know her spirit lives on in all of us. Love, Alex. And this is my favorite younger son, Bram.
Thanks for coming. Even after her stroke, you could tell my grandmother had the kind of vocabulary you build up over 96 years of living. She had trouble recalling basic words and stringing together sentences, but then she'd call my dog a dilettante or go perambulating around the nursing home in her wheelchair, introducing herself to the other residents and somehow remembering their names. She kept her social graces as well. Florence Molina met my grandfather at a workman's circle summer camp. He was a little older and didn't notice her at first until the campers had a costume party, and she went dressed as a loose woman, which meant a 1920s flapper. She once told me she dated another man during her time at Cornell until she realized the only thing she liked about him was that he smelled like a chemistry lab, just like Hank Sable. They were married in 1942. Hank wrote in his University of Toronto Medical School yearbook that year that he wanted to become a biochemist, provided he survived the war and marriage. He served as a doctor in the Royal Canadian Navy, and Flossie helped treat Canadian soldiers' uniforms while renting a basement apartment in Toronto. Both their families left Europe, Russia really, before Hitler's rise to power. Hank's family moved to Toronto, Ontario, where he was born. Flossie was born in Buffalo, New York. Their families survived the war very much intact, but it left a great impression on both of them. Years later, when she moved to Cleveland, Flossie helped relocate the families of Holocaust survivors. After the war, they landed in St. Louis at Washington University, where Hank earned a PhD in biochemistry, and Flossie earned a master's in social work at the Brown School. They shared a few apartments in St. Louis, most notably one on Pershing Street, only a few blocks from where I lived in college. When she came for my graduation, we drove by her old building to find it had been razed and turned into a parking lot. She ranted about how Rockefeller killed the streetcar system. My mother was born in St. Louis, and my uncle was born a little later during the family's brief stay in Boston. They soon moved to Cleveland, the city I think of as my grandmotherland. She once told me her happiest years were those first ones in Cleveland. They were a young family renting a pleasant home in a neighborhood full of kids. Hank started his distinguished career at the biochemistry department at Case Western Reserve University, or Screw U as they called it. Flossie eventually became a social worker at an elementary school where she met her lifelong friends, the Bananas, who you'll soon meet as well. Hank and Flossie lived an enriched life in Cleveland. They were active in their congregation and with the Cleveland Symphony Orchestra, among many, many other organizations. They were ardent listeners to CBS radio until about the mid-'80s when they started listening and pledging to NPR. Not long after my brother, her first grandson, was born, Flossie retired. She and Hank made frequent visits to Columbia to see us grandsons, and they received us in Cleveland and at the old cottage in Pickering, Ontario, that they kept for years, even after Hank died. When Hank's Alzheimer's took over and he moved into a nursing home, Flossie started living alone for the first time in her adult life. In '95, a few years after Hank died, she moved into an apartment temporarily for 20 years. The smell of that apartment will be forever tied to my memory of her, and that doesn't include the year the building transitioned from only retirees to half retirees and half college students, and the smell of dope started filling the hallways at night. That's the apartment we'd visit every Thanksgiving. After Hank died, she dated here and there, but always with the caveat, he's no Hank Sable. Just before she turned 90, she started dating Irv, who always made a point to tell us how head over heels he was about my grandmother. At her 90th birthday, I cornered him and said, "Irv, my Nana's 90 and you're only 89. What's up with that?" To which he replied, "Yeah, she's a cougar." Irv loved to cook. They'd make dinner and watch Turner Classic movies together. On my last visit to her apartment in Cleveland in 2014, she told me he was her best friend. "I've never had a man for a best friend before," she said. They talked every night. They were talking about moving in together when Irv died. Not into the same apartment, because she wanted to keep her independence, but into apartments at the same assisted living facility. Neither of them admitted it, but it probably wasn't safe for them to drive as much as they were to each other's homes. It was only a few months after Irv died that Nana had her fall, and only a few months after that, she had her stroke. She spent the last year and a half in Colombia. Every afternoon, my father, her son-in-law, would feed her lunch, and every evening my mother would feed her dinner. She wasn't Nana per se, but as my father says, she was a version of Nana. She hated the food, but appreciated the home-cooked meals my mother would bring her. She could remember the name of her aides and her table mates, and she could recall in incredible detail her family tree. She never forgot her cousins, and they never stopped calling to chat, even when Flossie couldn't keep her end of the conversation. The promise we make, the unspoken promise we make to someone as loved as my grandmother is, you will not die alone. I spent an hour and a half holding her hand on the last day of her life. She couldn't open her eyes. The one word she said was unintelligible, though it sounded like Alex, which is the name of my brother, who she knew was on his way from Denver. The last thing I told her was, I love you. The next to last thing I said was that hers was a life well lived. You left the world a better place than you found it, I told her. And it's true. The daughter of immigrants, she transcended the American dream. Florence Sable, née Moline, born September 11th, 1920, was the love of my life. And she died peacefully, April 30th, 2017, surrounded by family, a loved woman.
Thank you for your beautiful, touching words. And now we'd like to hear from Luann Lasky, Florence's dear friend. Come on forward, Luann.
You've all heard a lot about the bananas today. They are dear friends. And can you hear me? Move a little closer. Raise your hand if you can hear me. Okay, that's good. The bananas had lunch together yesterday. So what I'm remarking today about Flossie is not all from me, it's from all of the bananas. She was the best one, without a doubt. She was dubbed Mother Superior. What an honor. An honor that maybe she didn't value, because the first chance she got, she morphed that title into Mother Shapiro. More appropriate, perhaps. Flossie's career was, as you know, as a social worker for the Cuyahoga Heights school system. She was great. She was non-judgmental, never patronizing, didn't condescend to her clients. She was terrific. And I don't think they have replaced her. I think she was irreplaceable in that function. Our friend was eminently practical. Kind of asked the bananas for, give me a word that seems to sum her up. And more than one of them came up with practical. She was solid. For each of our wild and crazy banana parties, where Flossie often kept us under control, each banana was given a food assignment to bring for the occasion. For one gathering, Flossie volunteered, I'll bring dessert. It was to be a birthday cake, to be exact. Checking Davis Bakery, she saw this gorgeous cake, and it was half price. Like me, Flossie couldn't resist that. She scooped it up, brought it triumphantly to our gala. There was only one flaw, written beautifully in frosting on the cake. were the words, "Good luck, Dolores." There was no Dolores amongst the bananas. The bunch is still laughing about that, but we gobbled it up anyway. It didn't seem to matter. Her 90th birthday party at Lander Haven was an occasion that we all remember. So many of her friends were there, and family, of course. Daughter Margie, son-in-law George, grandsons Alex and Bram, and her son Jerry and daughter-in-law Terry. What a testimony to Flossie. The beautiful family was there. Floss was a fine cook, but she always denied it. She said she didn't like to cook, but her gazpacho was legendary, as was her chicken salad with green grapes, a nice Flossie touch. On the wild side, she was pretty famous for her Bloody Marys, a drink which brightened many a party at the Sables on Dysart Road. And you know what? She never revealed the recipe. There was something in there special. I hesitate to guess. More than Tabasco. It was great. But true to herself, she didn't share that with us. On the topic of food, Flossie loved eggplant. I never understood that about her. So we dutifully, as bananas, getting festive meals ready for the bunch, would make eggplant parmesan, stuffed eggplant. What's the Italian eggplant that's done in oil and vinegar, while secretly hating the purple vegetable? But Flossie was worth it. She liked eggplant, so we made it for her. At one festive frolic on Dysart Road, Banana Jean's brother Jimmy, who was visiting from London, was initiated into bananahood. It was a beautiful ritual. Complete with an official medal, he became a member of the Royal Antediluvian Order of Bananas. It was moving. However, he was heard to say, while gesturing toward Floss, "She will keep this bunch in order." How true. Remember the trip to Switzerland, bananas? 4 of us went. Flossie didn't join us for that one, but to give her a little taste of the Switzerland safari, we threw a raclette party, complete with a rented raclette machine, which Hank manned beautifully. He had, of course, they lived in Switzerland for years. He knew his raclette machines. I didn't know it before the trip, but a raclette plate contains a gob of melted, delicious cheese, some little dill pickles, some French bread, and what else? There's a 4th. Onions. Thank you. And onions. We had a good time. Hank loved dishing up the raclette, and we really ate. Florence liked it, or she said she liked it. What a friend. And now we're here to say goodbye to Flossie. We all know what we've lost. A wise, steadfast, loyal, honest, and dear friend. And she always paid us the compliment of telling us the truth. We'll remember Flossie, and we'll hold her in our hearts. Thank you, my dear.
Thank you all for your beautiful words. Let's take a moment of silence as we each remember Flossie in our own hearts. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity, and youth to age, from innocence to awareness, and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, and strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat. After looking backward or ahead, we see victory lies not at some high place along the way, but having made the journey, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage made stage by stage to life everlasting. Please rise now, if you're able, for El Malay Rachamim. El Malay Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamse Minocha Nechona Tachat Chanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Tehorim, Kazor Harakia Mazirim, Et Nishmat, Fega Bat Eliyahu Vebatya, Shelacha Laolama, Baal Harachamim, Yatirechu Peseter Kenafav Laolamim, Vayitzor Bitzor Hachayim Et Nishmata, Adonaihu Nachalata, V'tanuach b'shalom al mishkavav v'nomar amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to our beloved Florence Sable, known in our tradition as Fega Bat Eliyahu Vebatya, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us all say, Amen. Please be seated for just a few moments. This concludes our service here. We'll proceed from here to Beit Olam Cemetery for burial. And following the burial, the family receiving guests at the apartment of Susan and Richard Glazer at the Blair House, 19601 Van Aken Boulevard in Shaker Heights, floor PH Penthouse, and you have to dial 154 when you get there. And they'll be sitting following burial until 7 p.m. this evening. Thank you.